In this lesson, we're going to talk about all of the tools you need to build kitchen cabinets or built-ins. And there are a lot you could buy, but there's only really a core group that you absolutely need. And then we'll go out from there with the additional tools that are nice to haves or must-haves for certain types of projects. So the first tool we're going to talk about are table saws. So table saws are probably the most important piece of power tool equipment you're going to own or you're going to use during the course of a cabinet build or a built-in project. So the table saw, if you don't already own one or if you've never used one before, really you're going to be using for your straight cuts. So you're going to be, not all of your straight cuts, but most of them. So a straight cut would be, say for instance, you buy a large sheet of plywood, a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet, and we need to cut 10 or 12 parts out of that or something. We're going to be doing most of that cutting, those part cutting on the table saw. The table saw is perfect for long straight cuts, and it's really what we'll be using that for. We'll also use the table saw for building some other cabinet components. Okay, so like adding grooves into some of our cabinet parts, like the doors, like the door stiles and rails. Also grooves in the back or the sides of our cabinet box. So it is a crucial tool to own. I would say if you don't have a table saw, either consider buying one or consider borrowing one. And we're going to talk about a couple different levels of table saws. All right, so there are a few different types of table saws you can consider purchasing. The first one is I guess in terms of the tiers, if you want to look at it that way, in price points. The entry-level table saws, or often referred to as hobby saws. The hobby saws are basically for your average do-it-yourselfer. They're around $100. You can get them at most home improvement stores, and they're fine for a lot of projects. For a large cabinet building, like if you're going to do an entire kitchen set of kitchen cabinets, or you're going to do a bunch of built-ins around your house, they're not ideal. And the reason they're not ideal is because the motors tend to be a little underpowered. The work surface that you actually would lay sheet goods on or parts is a little undersized, and it makes building or dropping a large sheet of plywood on there a real challenge. And actually, I would say probably unsafe unless you're working with a couple people or you integrate it into a larger sort of work surface. So hobby saws, I would probably skip them. The next level of table saws are what I would consider, or what I guess most people would consider to be contractor grade table saws. So contractor grade table saws have a bigger motor, they're a little bigger work surface, and they have the power to do what you need them to do in terms of cabinet building. They can pretty much do any job any table saw can do. The couple drawbacks are they are not quite as heavy duty, so their work surface is still a little smaller than we'd like. But they're designed and built for your average contractor. So that means they're lightweight, so you can pick them up. Most of the body is made from heavy duty plastic, and so you can pick them up, throw them in the back of a truck, just like a contractor would, right? So the drawback to contractor saws, in addition to it being a little small, is sometimes they don't take stacked blades. So when we get into some of these other parts, we'll talk about this, but you really need some way of making grooves or dados, and that's on a table saw. You could do that by just stacking blade after blade after blade until you get your desired width or thickness of that cut. And I have a contractor grade table saw. I have a Hitachi, and I've never owned like a high-end table saw. This one cost me about $200 or $300, and it works fine, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. But I can't put a full-size dado stack on here, so I can only put 2 or 3 little dado blades together. It's kind of like a table saw blade with another table saw blade. I can put 2 or 3 of them together, so I can get maybe a 1/4 inch wide to a 3/8 inch cut, and that's it. It really, this particular model doesn't accommodate a full 3/4 inch or 1 inch wide dado. And when we get into machining our cabinets and we cut all of our parts out, when you want to add those grooves, it's a really nice feature to have. Otherwise, you have to do it with a different tool, or you have to make multiple passes. So if I wanted to, for example, put in a 3/4 inch wide groove down a piece of plywood, my table saw only takes 3/8 of an inch dado stacks. And I think that may be barely squeezing them in. So what I would have to do is make one pass, reset the fence, and then make another pass to get that full 3/4 inch groove in there. So you know what? I'd rather do that on a router with a 3/4 inch bit. Or so that's just something to think about if you're looking at contractor grade table saws. Is look at the dado blade capacity. Make sure it has one. And again, if you don't have that full capacity, then we'll probably need another tool. So the next level up when it comes to table saws are, I guess, cabinet saws. So cabinet saws can come in a variety of horsepower in the motors. You start to seeing 2 and 3 and 5 horsepower motors, where the entry level and the contractor grade table saws tend not even to list horsepowers because it's probably below a horsepower, or it's barely on the scale, right? So you start seeing these 3, 5 horsepower table saws. They're massive. These table saws are huge. They're very, very heavy, you know, several hundred pounds. They're designed to be put in your workshop and really never moved again, or moved very sparingly. They tend to be a work center in your shop. So what a higher horsepower motor gets you on a table saw, and which you really, with the contractor saws will be fine for this, but if you're cutting thicker and thicker pieces of wood, which we're really not going to be doing with a cabinet build too much, but your higher horsepower motor will be able to cut right through thick pieces of heavy, dense hardwood like oak, where those entry-level saws will really just bog that motor down and maybe trip a breaker. So that's what you're really getting with those higher powered cabinet saws. And there's cabinet saws, hybrid saws. Those are type of the larger end units. They tend to be well over $1,000, anywhere between $750, $500, all the way up to several thousand. They even have units that are a couple grand that are. There's one brand called Saw Stop, and if you were to accidentally hit your finger on the blade, it actually pulls the blade down and prevents you from getting cut. So you kind of get some more features on those higher end models. The work surfaces are very large, and so you could drop a big piece of plywood on it, and one person can just push it through and get the cut done. So they're ideal. It's just, do you want to spend $1,200 on a table saw? If you think this is going to be something you're going to get into, you're going to build your own kitchen cabinets, you're going to build your own built-ins, and then maybe you're going to build them for other people, maybe you're going to start a little business on the side doing this, yeah, then you're going to want to upgrade to one of those hybrid saws or cabinet saws. So again, the big advantages of a cabinet saw or a hybrid saw is you get a big work surface, you have a powerful motor, you have that work surface allows you to have a fence on your table saw that expands out to maybe 3 and 4 feet or something. So you kind of get limited in some of those smaller saws with how big the fence goes. Maybe you can only cut 18 inches, 24 inches, something along those lines. So dropping a big piece of plywood on there and cutting it, if you want a big piece cut out of there, it becomes more difficult. And also those larger cabinet saws will allow you to put those full stack dados. You can put, an 1.5 inch stack of dados on there and drop it, put a groove in there, no problem. Whereas you're gonna have to futz around a little bit more with a contractor grade table saw. So that's pretty much the basics of what you're looking at. So you want to, if you don't already own one, you will kind of figure out which one you want to get. Probably avoid that entry level if you're going to be doing your whole set of kitchen cabinets. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to show you some clips here, is a kind of a workstation for your table saw. So if you have a contractor grade table saw like I do, then there's a way you can upgrade the work surface so it's much more accommodating to those large sheet goods like we're going to be working with. And that is inserting your table saw into a workstation. So you build basically a platform. You could do it stationary, you can add legs, feet, whatever you want to, and actually have free plans on our site, and there'll be a link to that in the show notes. So if you have a contractor grade table saw, or if you only want to spend $300 or $400 or $200 or $300, whatever it is, and you still want that capacity to cut larger stuff, then consider getting a contractor saw and putting it in a custom built workstation that only costs maybe $100 worth of parts and maybe less. You can build it out of some scrap plywood, and that kind of best of both worlds there. You get that large work surface, and you get the capacity to cut large pieces, And if you, like I said, most contractor saws have a powerful enough motor to do everything you need to do with cabinet making. So we'll have a link to that, and I'll show you some pictures and clips of what my Hitachi station looks like.